So for this session, we will discuss about the fundamentals of assurance engagements. Therefore, we will talk about your assurance engagement per se, the elements of assurance engagement, and at the same time, we look into the difference between assurance versus non-assurance. So let's start. So what is assurance? Assurance refers to the practitioner's satisfaction as to the reliability of an assertion being made by one party for use by another party. It is the degree of certainty, wait, degree of certainty the practitioner has attained and wishes to convey to intended users. Okay, so always remember in an assurance engagement, what happens is that there is an assertion, which is also known as a representation. And this assertion is being asserted by the first party. And then this will be used by another party. Now, to check this assertion, to check this assertion, what we do is as a practitioner, check for the reliability of this assertion from the first party being asserted to another party. Again, in assurance, you need to look at this two-party relationship. One asserts something, another one uses what has been asserted. So for example, one gives a financial statement and another person will use that financial statement. And here comes now a practitioner. So what does the practitioner do? The practitioner will check as to the reliability of the assertion being represented by another person. So this one is the one who asserts and the other person uses what had been asserted and another person checks for that reliability of what had been asserted. So whenever we say assert, may parang pinapakita or binibigay. So one person asserts something, the other person uses what had been asserted or represented, and another person checks on the reliability of what has been asserted or represented. So that's the concept of an assurance. Going further, let's discuss then assurance engagement. So having known the concept of assurance, we look into the reliability of what had been asserted by the first party to the second party. Let's look into an assurance engagement. Now, an assurance engagement is an engagement in which practitioner expresses a conclusion designed to enhance the degree of confidence of the intended users other than the responsible party about the outcome of the evaluation or measurement of a subject matter against criteria. Okay, so let's break that down. We start first with a responsible party. The responsible party provides for a subject matter. Now, out of the subject matter, the practitioner looks for a suitable criteria and a sufficient appropriate evidence so to have a conclusion to the intended users. So it still goes with our earlier definition of an assurance. The responsible party is the first party. The intended users is the second party. And still, we have here your practitioner who provides or who lends reliability over the particular subject matter or to enhance the degree of confidence over that subject matter. The practitioner provides a conclusion. So that is the definition of an assurance engagement. Ulitin natin. Sabi natin kanina dun sa assurance, may first party, may second party. And then, nagbibigay kasi ng assertion tong si first party kay second party. Ngayon, to check the reliability, meron tayong tinatawag na practitioner. So doon kinuha yung concept lang din or the definition for an assurance engagement. You have a responsible party who provides for a subject matter, and then the intended user will make use of that subject matter. But together with the subject matter, the practitioner provides a conclusion. Again, this is what we said a while back as to the reliability of what had been asserted by the responsible party or the first party. So with this conclusion, the practitioner enhances the degree of confidence over what had been asserted by the responsible party. Therefore, to look into the objective of an assurance engagement, we can derive it from the definition itself. It is for the practitioner to measure a subject matter that is the responsibility of another party against suitable criteria and express a conclusion that provides the intended user with a level of assurance about that subject matter. So since we want that particular assertion as reliable, then we have now or we are giving an assurance over the reliability of that particular subject matter or assertion. So here we have the responsible party, which provides an assertion in the form of a particular subject matter, and the practitioner will look into that subject matter over a suitable criteria. We'll look into the degree of correspondence of that subject matter over that suitable criteria. Sir, anong ibig sabihin ng degree of correspondence? So meron tayong, halimbawa, yung responsible party may sinasabi or may binibigay na report. Now, we look into the possible criteria to check whether the report is within a particular standard or whatever. Now, to determine whether the subject matter is with a degree of correspondence over that criteria, the practitioner gathers sufficient appropriate evidence. And that is, out of that sufficient appropriate evidence, it can now create a conclusion. And that conclusion, together with the subject matter, will be used by the intended users. Now, if you ask what is the use of the conclusion, to provide reliability or assurance over that subject matter, or in short, it provides degree of confidence over the subject matter. So assurance, kasi nga, it provides reliableness or reliability over that particular subject matter, or at the same time, it enhances the degree of confidence over that subject matter na possibly tama or correct kung ano man yung nandun sa subject matter. Kaya ang tinatawag natin doon ay assurance. It provides an assurance or reliability that that particular subject matter is within the suitable criteria. Now, let's provide the objective of your assurance engagement. So, in general, assurance engagements performed by professional accountants are intended to enhance the credibility of information. And we already said that earlier. It enhances the credibility, it enhances the reliability of the information. It provides extra confidence over that information. Why? Because now the practitioner lends credibility over that subject matter. How? By looking into the degree of correspondence of that particular subject matter over a particular criteria. Now, out of that subject matter and criteria, makaka-derive na siya ng kanyang conclusion. Pero ang question, paano mag-gather si practitioner ng sufficient, appropriate evidence? So let's go back to what we are talking. We're talking about your objective. So it enhances the credibility of information about the outcome of evaluation or measurement of a subject matter against a criteria, thereby improving the likelihood that the information will meet the needs of an intended user. Assurance engagements enhance the degree of confidence of the intended user because the quality of information for decision-making is improved. Why? Because again, the subject matter now is reliable. So the decision-making of the user is now improved because the document that the user is now using is reliable. At the same time, it was already checked by a particular practitioner. So whenever you're asked what is the objective of an assurance engagement, lagi lang naman yan, enhanced degree of confidence, reliability, credibility of information, dun lang siya umiikot. So pag tinanong agad sa pag meron agad sa MCQ tinanong, what is the objective of an assurance engagements, or the following are the objectives of an assurance engagement, iikot lang yun sa tatlo. Enhance credibility, enhanced degree of confidence or enhanced reliability over the information. Why? Because we already discussed the concept of an assurance. We look into whether the data or the subject matter provided by the first party is in consonance with the suitable criteria. So tinitignan natin kung may subject matter yan, si practitioner, ang tinitignan niya whether swak siya sa criteria. And based on the subject matter and criteria, magbibigay si practitioner ng conclusion. Ngayon, bakit enhance yung credibility of information or enhance yung degree of confidence? Because together with subject matter, may dinagdag na conclusion coming from the practitioner. So this conclusion, therefore, the effect is that it enhances the previous information. And what is that previous information? That is the subject matter. So if you get the idea of an assurance, you get the idea of an assurance engagement, generally, you get the idea of an audit. Now let's look as to the objective per framework. According to the Philippine Framework for Assurance Engagements, an assurance engagement is conducted first to provide a high level of assurance that the subject matter confirms in all material respects with identified suitable criteria. Second, to provide a moderate level of assurance that the subject matter is plausible in these circumstances. Therefore, there are two types of assurance engagements according to framework. Actually, if you look at it, the objective generally is placed under the general statement. Per framework, the objective there is an enumeration of the types of assurance engagement. Ulitin natin. In general, nandun talaga yung objective ng assurance engagement. Yung nakalagay sa framework, hindi talaga siya objective. It's more of the enumeration of the types of the assurance engagement. And what are the types of assurance engagement? First, an assurance engagement which provides high level of assurance. Another, assurance engagement which provides a moderate level of assurance. And what do we call those assurance engagement? First, we have reasonable assurance engagements. These are engagements that provide high but not absolute level of assurance. Okay, take note. It's only high but not absolute. Sir, what's the difference? When we say high, it means it is below 100%. It could be up to 99%. Why is it not absolute? Because when we say absolute, it is 100%. Sir, why is it only less than 100%? It is less than 100% because generally, we assume that there is an audit risk. We assume that there is an audit risk. We assume that in our audit, we cannot test everything. We cannot test everything. There's no 100% testing. That's why you always say that audit normally or evidence is persuasive rather than conclusive. Why is it persuasive? It does not really pertain to a particular or absolute effect or assurance. It could only provide for a certain level of assurance. You cannot conclude that 100% it is correct. It is merely persuasive as to the effect. Meaning it could persuade you that this is the assurance, but it is not purely absolute. It is not purely absolute. Again, because we are accounting for risk. And there are different limitations also. But generally, because of risk, we cannot provide 100% or absolute level of assurance. Next, assurance engagement risk to an acceptable low level as the basis for a positive form of expression of the practitioner's conclusion. Acceptable low level as the positive form of expression of the practitioner's conclusion. Why is it acceptable low level? Acceptable low level because, again, we said there is a risk. But we want that the risk is low so that we can provide a high level of assurance. Take note. If the risk is low, then it means the assurance should be high. Kaya nakalagay din dyan na dapat nasa acceptable low level ang ating risk para makapagbigay ng high assurance. And in short, because of that high assurance, our expression of opinion is in a positive form. Normally, this applies to audit engagement. Now, let's look into a limited assurance engagement. In a limited assurance engagement, you only provide for a moderate or limited level of assurance. So, your assurance is moderate. Therefore, your risk is at an acceptable level. Meaning, acceptable lang siya up to medium or moderate risk 2, hindi low. Para yung assurance mo rin ay moderate. And since moderate lang yan, you provide for a negative form of expression of opinion. Negative form of expression of opinion. Ulitin natin yan. There are two types of assurance engagements. First, we have your reasonable assurance engagements. Second, we have your limited assurance engagement. So in your reasonable, the level of risk is low. That's why the assurance is high. Because the risk is low, then therefore the assurance is high. Kasi nga parang kung magkano yung binawas mong risk, kumbaga, yun yung level naman ng assurance niya. And the expression is a positive or in a positive form. Next, we have your limited assurance. In your limited assurance, the risk is merely acceptable in short, medium risk, or moderate risk. Therefore, whatever is left is the assurance. Kumbaga, ito yung risk, tinanggal mo yung risk, yung matitira, yun yung level of assurance na may ibibigay. Now, the expression of opinion is in negative form. In negative form. Let's proceed to the concept why we only need a reasonable assurance. So, we said earlier that we do not provide an absolute assurance. We only provide for high or moderate level of assurance, but we cannot provide for absolute. That is because of the limitations of assurance engagements. Now, let's look into the limitations. First, that is the use of selective testing, meaning we cannot test all, we can only test some, therefore, we cannot provide 100%. Next, inherent limitations of internal controls. Since internal controls are not working effectively, then in short, our auditors will ultimately have a control risk. Diba? Ang ating audit risk model, inherent risk multiplied by control risk multiplied by your detection risk. Since there is normally a control risk because there is no 100% perfect internal control, there will always be a control risk. Since there will always be control risk, that will provide a level of audit risk too. Next, the fact that much of the evidence available are persuasive rather than conclusive. We already said that earlier. You cannot conclude out of a particular evidence. It's more of it could provide for a particular decision or conclusion, but you cannot say that that is absolutely the conclusion. Next, we have the use of judgment in gathering and evaluating evidence. And then lastly, the characteristics of the subject matter when evaluated or measured against the identified criteria. So those are the limitations of assurance engagement. Take note, why is it limitation? Just because we cannot provide for an absolute level of assurance, you can only provide for high or moderate level of assurance, but not absolute. That is because of the limitations of assurance engagements. Now, let's look into your assurance engagements as the structure. First, we have your assertion-based engagement and direct reporting engagement. So what is the difference between an assertion-based engagement and a direct reporting engagement? So first, in your assurance-based engagement, the evaluation or measurement of the subject matter is performed by the responsible party. And the subject matter information is in the form of an assertion by the responsible party that is made available to the intended users. So in assertion-based engagement, the practitioner's conclusion can be worded in terms of the responsible party's assertion. So in our opinion, responsible party's assertion that internal control is effective in all material respects based on XYZ criteria is fairly stated. So if you look at it, so we have here your responsible party. The responsible party provides for the subject matter. And then that particular subject matter will be looked into by the practitioner by looking into the different criterias. But in direct reporting engagement, the practitioner either directly performs the evaluation or measurement of the subject matter or obtains representation from the responsible party that has performed the evaluation or measurement that is not available to intended users. Now, here, if you look at it, the practitioner could provide for the measurement or evaluation. So instead of the responsible party providing for the subject matter, here it could be the practitioner or the representative of the responsible party which provides for the subject matter. So yun yung difference sila. Ultimately, kumbaga yung measurement and evaluation dito sa ating assertion-based engagement na kay responsible party. Ito, yung measurement and evaluation, pwedeng na kay practitioner. Pwedeng na kay practitioner. So, kaya siya direct reporting engagement kasi ultimately, nagsimula na yung measurement and evaluation kay practitioner. So, initially, you can already provide assurance based on what you have already measured and evaluated. However, in assertion-based, always remember there's an assertion first, and that assertion is through a subject matter information. And based on that subject matter information, we look into the degree of correspondence to a criteria and provide a conclusion thereof. So in an assertion-based, always remember the conclusion is based on the responsible party's assertion. While in direct reporting, the conclusion is based on the subject matter and the criteria. So, for example, in our opinion, the internal control is effective in all material aspects based on XYZ criteria. However, in our assertion engagement or attestation-based engagements, we first provide that the particular subject matter information came from a particular responsible party. So dito, may pinanggalingan yung ating subject matter information. Dito, wala. Kasi nga, ina-assume natin sa direct reporting, yung pinanggalingan nun, nanggaling na rin mismo kay practitioner. Or pwede rin from a particular responsible party. Now, let's look into the scope of the framework. So, the framework applies only to assurance engagements. So, normally, it is only for audit of FS, prospective financial statements, reporting on compliance with laws, rules, and regulations, and other assurance services. So, normally, audit, review, and other assurance. Therefore, non-assurance engagements are not covered. So, engagements covered by Philippine standards for related services such as agreed-upon procedures or agreed-upon engagements and compilations of financial or other information, preparation of tax returns, and consultancy. So those are non-assurance engagements. So normally, pag lumalabas sa board, ang labas lang naman ng mga non-assurance mo ay agreed-upon procedures and compilations. And then, all other else are assurance engagements. So, basta tandaan nyo, pagka eventually you lend credibility by looking into a possible criteria, then that is assurance. If ever hindi ka titingin sa criteria, so magko-compile ka lang, gagawa ka lang ng report, mga ganun, that is non-assurance. Kaya nga, agreed upon procedures and compilations are non-assurance. That is purely because you prepare for those items and you did not look into a possible criteria to check the correspondence of that subject matter information to a criteria. So what is non-assurance engagement? A non-assurance engagement are those that do not result in the practitioner's expression of a conclusion that provides a level of assurance, whether negative assurance or other form of assurance. The practitioner does not convey to the intended users any assurance as to the reliability of an assertion. So again, for non-assurance, there's no assurance at all because you are just preparing a report. However, for assurance, you provide for a conclusion because you look into the subject matter information, its degree of correspondence to a criteria, and therefore, you lend credibility over that subject matter or that particular information. So for assurance, normally, ang naman niya, sabi natin, audit, review, other assurance. For non-assurance, ang normal na lumalabas, agreed upon procedures and compilations. Alam naman na natin ang definition ng assurance, alam na natin ang definition ng assurance engagements. Therefore, mas madali na ninyong i-differentiate ang assurance sa non-assurance. Now, let's look into your non-assurance engagements. So first, we have here your agreed upon procedures. So what is the objective of an agreed upon procedures? That is for the auditor to carry out procedures for an audit nature as agreed by the auditor and the entity and any appropriate third parties and to report on factual findings. Take note, there is no assurance expressed in the report and the distribution of the report is restricted. Lumalabas to, tandaan ninyo, the distribution of the report is restricted. It is only restricted to those parties that have agreed to the procedures to be performed. Why? It cannot be used by any third party. It can only be used to those persons who agreed to create that particular procedure. And according to PSRS 44, that is Philippine Standards on Related Services, the report on agreed upon procedures engagement needs to describe the purpose and the agreed upon procedures of the engagement in sufficient detail to enable the users of the report to understand the nature and extent of the work performed. Next, compilation. Under compilation, the objective of a compilation is to use accounting expertise as opposed to auditing expertise to collect, classify, and summarize financial information. So normally, you create only financial statements or you create a report out of the records of the company. Those are considered compilation. Here, there's again no test of assertions. Therefore, there is no assurance. And what is the benefit to the users? Derived benefit based on the service performed by the accountant because that particular report is performed with professional competence and due care. Next, we have consultancy. Normally, this is for tax. We have tax compliance and planning, and also management consultancy. Under consultancy, a pervasive characteristic of a CPA's role in a consulting services engagement is that of being an objective advisor on the use of the information. So ultimately, for consultancy, take note of the term objective advisor. For compilation, take note of compiling or creating a report based on professional competence and due care. And then for agreed upon procedures, these normally are agreed upon by different parties out of the particular report. Always remember, since these are non-assurance engagements, therefore, there is no assurance provided under this different engagement, agreed upon, compilation, or consultants. And if you are asked what is the standard that is used for this particular engagements, we use your PSRS or your Philippine Standards on Related Services. Okay? So again, we have engagements, whether assurance or non-assurance. For assurance, we have your attestation, we have your audit, attestation, we have your audit, we have your review, and we have your other attestation services. For non-assurance, generally, lumalabas dyan ay yung agreed upon procedures nyo, compilation, isama na rin natin yung ating consultancy. Tandaan na, meron pa yung other attestation services. Ilagay nyo na lang siya dito sa other attestation services. So normally, yun yung mga performance reviews, yun yung mga examinations of different forecasts or budgets. Pagka may examination na or may review na term, may assurance doon. Bakit? Kasi chinecheck natin yung isang subject matter information. Pag walang sinabing review or examination, then that's non-assurance. So ang keywords na lang for other attestation services, pag nilagyan ng examination, halimbawa, examination of budgets, gano'n. Examination of budgets, pag nilagyan ng gano'n, that's attestation. Why? Kasi nga, you are now testing something. Attest, kaya nga siya attest, you're testing something. What are you testing? A subject matter information out of a criteria, attest. So you're testing something. Or pag ang ginamit din ay review, so halimbawa performance reviews, mga ganon, that is still considered as other attestation services or attestation engagements. Again, why? You're testing something. Pero pagka compilation, consulting, you're not testing something. Therefore, those are non-assurance. Alam niyo naman yung concept ng assurance engagements. Therefore, it's easier for you to understand what are attestations and or assurance engagement. Sa non-assurance engagement. Bakit siya assurance engagement? Kasi nagbibigay tayo ng degree of confidence, reliability, or we enhance that particular information. Or in short, attestation kasi we're testing something. Yun yung concept niya, assurance at saka attestation. Kaya pinagsasama siya. So let's look into your different assurance and related services. So first, we have here your auditing. So the nature is an audit. For related services, we have your review, agreed upon procedures, and we have your compilation. So in your audit, we have a high level of assurance, while in your review, we have moderate or limited level of assurance. And you already know the difference between moderate and limited level of assurance. Tama. Na-discuss na natin yan kanina when we discuss the types of assurance engagement. We call this one your reasonable assurance engagement. Iselect ko na lang ulit. While this one is known as limited assurance engagement. And then pag reasonable, sabi natin, positive form. Pag limited, negative form. The standard for audit is your PSA, while for review, Philippine Standard for Review Engagements. For agreed upon and compilation, sabi natin no assurance. It's factual findings of procedures. So we have here PSRS 44, while for compilation, PSRS 4410. So that is identification of information compiled. That is Philippine Standards on Review Services. Just in case you were asked what particular standard is used for audit, review, agreed upon, and compilation. So for related services, always remember it is PSRS. Kasi nga, Philippine Standard on Related Services. Ito, related services, sabi natin, yan yung mga non-assurance engagements. Ito naman, ito yung mga assurance engagements natin. Or, para hindi kayo malito, yan din yung attestation services natin. Ito naman, non-attest services. Yun lang naman, parang minsan nalilito siguro kayo na assurance services. Ang tawag din natin doon ay attestation, engagement, attestation services. Non-attestation, yun naman yung ating non-assurance engagements. So, para hindi lang kayo malito, baka nakakakita kayo ng attest or non-attest, non-assurance, assurance, they actually mean the same. Assurance is attest, non-attest is non-assurance. So let's look into assurance engagements. So these are engagements to report on a broad range of subject matters covering financial and non-financial information. So these are attest and direct reporting engagements. So engagements to report internally and externally, and engagements in the private and public sector. So what are normally the requirements before acceptance? So only where the practitioner's knowledge of the engagement circumstances indicates that it has the required ethical requirements, importante yan. And then the following assurance engagement exhibits the following characteristics. First, there is a subject matter, there is a criteria, there is access to sufficient appropriate evidence, and then the conclusion, and ultimately that the practitioner is satisfied that there is a rational purpose of the engagement. So ultimately, parang sinasabi na natin dito yung ating different elements of an assurance engagement. So yun yung ating subject matter, yun yung ating criteria, yun yung ating evidence. Ganun. So let's look into the elements, therefore, of assurance engagements. So first, there's a three-party relationship, and that is composed of responsible party, the practitioner, and intended user. And nasabi na natin yan kanina, there's a first party, there's a second party, and the work of the first party is reviewed first by the practitioner, and the practitioner provides a conclusion together with the report of the first party. The second party uses that conclusion and the report of the first party. And who is the first party? The responsible party. And who is the second party? That is the intended user. Next, there's appropriate subject matter. So what is a subject matter? Subject matter refers to the information to be evaluated or measured against the criteria. And we also have subject matter information. These are the outcome of the evaluation or measurement of a subject matter. So let's say we have here your subject matter. These are your different transactions and events. These transactions and events will be evaluated and measured upon. And based on the evaluation and measurement of these transactions or event, we have a subject matter information. And that subject matter information is your financial statement. And this financial statement will be tested to a particular criteria. And what is that criteria? That is your Philippine Financial Reporting Standards. Next, what is a criteria? A criteria refer to the standard or benchmark used to evaluate or measure the subject matter or an assurance engagement, including, where relevant, benchmarks for presentation and disclosure. And normally, the characteristics of a suitable criteria, we use our mnemonic RAN-CR. What is RAN-CR? First, it is reliable, so reliability. Next, understandability. Next, we have neutrality. And then we have completeness. And we have relevance. First, reliability. So when we say reliability, we look into whether we can have a consistent evaluation and measurement of the subject matter out of that particular criteria. So we look here the consistency of evaluation or the measurement of the subject matter over a particular criteria. For understandability, it means we can provide a clear conclusion based on our interpretation of that particular criteria. For neutrality, that is to provide a particular conclusion that is free from bias. Normally naman, pag neutrality, lagi ang keyword niya dyan, free from bias. Next, we have completeness, meaning the criteria is sufficiently complete. That is, whenever we use the criteria, we can evaluate or measure the subject matter information. Next, we have your relevance. That is to contribute to the conclusion that provides a proper decision making or that would assist the decision making of our intended users. So it is relevant whenever we say it could contribute to a conclusion that could assist users in making an informed decision. Next, we have sufficient appropriate evidence. So evidence refers to information obtained by the practitioner in arriving the conclusions on which the conclusion is based. And normally, whenever we talk about sufficient appropriate evidence, we have sufficient talking about quantity, appropriateness talking about quality. But generally, that is not only the consideration in planning the engagement. Aside from sufficiency and appropriateness, we look also as to the materiality, the risk, the cost benefit, and of course, our judgment. Again, we're talking about evidence, we do not only look as to the sufficiency and appropriateness of the evidence, but we look also as to our materiality. Aside from materiality, we look into the risk. We look also as to the cost benefit, and we look into the judgment. First, as to materiality, we look into the nature, timing, and extent of our evidence gathering procedures. Whether, again, if ever we will look into our evidence, that particular evidence will lead us to a conclusion that the subject matter information is free from material misstatement. So, um, we look into our materiality threshold in determining the extent, the nature, the timing of our audit evidence. Next, we have your risk. So we look into our acceptable risk, our audit risk. As I told you, our audit risk is composed of our inherent risk, your control risk, and your detection risk. So based on our audit risk, we determine the sufficiency and appropriateness of our evidence. So if the risk is high, if you take higher risk, then your evidence could be low or konti lang. If the risk is low, then you have more audit evidence. Ganun lang naman yung relationship ng ating evidence sa risk. Next, the relationship of our evidence as to cost-benefit. So if ever we look into the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures or gathering of our audit evidence, and we determine the cost of using that procedure, at the same time, the benefit we take out of using that procedure. By the way, whenever we talk about evidence gathering, we talk about using or doing our audit procedures. So based on our audit procedures, we determine if ever it is costly, and then what benefit we can derive out of that audit procedure. And lastly, as to our professional judgment, whether we will do that procedure or not. So these are other items that we consider in our audit engagement. So aside from sufficiency and appropriateness of audit evidence, we look into materiality, we look into the risk, we look into the cost benefit, and our professional judgment. And then lastly, we have our written assurance report. A written assurance report should be in the form appropriate to a reasonable assurance engagement or a limited assurance engagement. And we already talked about that. Pag reasonable, positive. Pag limited, negative. Limited, ang other term natin dyan ay moderate. Ang other term natin dyan ay moderate. So pronouncements on assurance engagements, I just place it here. We have here your PSAs. Nasabi na natin yan. Gagamitin natin sa audit. PSRE for review engagement. PSAE on other assurance engagement. PSRS for related services. Pag tinanong sa inyo yung practice statements, PAPs, PREPs, PAEPs, and PRSPS. Ingatan nyo to kasi lumalabas to sa board exam. What is the practice statement for related services? So dapat alam niyo, ang sagot natin doon is Philippine Related Services Practice Statements. And then lastly, we have also your PSQCs. In PSQC or quality control, we apply this one for all services, whether audit, review, assurance engagements, or related services, so long as it falls under the AASC's engagement standards. And what are those AASC engagement standards? Itong apat na to. Yan yung ating engagement standards. Ang tawag natin dyan ay engagement standards. AASC engagement standards. Sa PFRS naman, ang tawag lang natin ay PFRSS. Yan na yung PFRS, PS. Tama? At saka PFRIC or PIC. All in all, tinatawag natin yung PFRSS. Dito naman sa audit, ang tawag natin ay engagement standards. Ang laman nun, PSAs, PSREs, PSAEs, and PSRS. Again, huwag niyong kalimutan yung kanyang mga related practice statements kasi lumalabas yan. At kailan natin siya i-apply. Okay? And that's it for our first topic, assurance engagement.